Today, we're going to be planning and flying what's usually called the long IFR cross-country in our Cessna 172. Over the next few videos, we're going to go through the full flight planning process and flight to each airport with instrument procedures at each one. For the full series, check out the page on our website linked here or in the description. You could play along with us on your own on the sim or fly the real thing if you're nearby. We're on the ground at Renton Municipal near Seattle. We asked you all for route ideas if you had the long cross-country coming up, and this one came in from Seattle RAF, who was also super helpful with some local IFR knowledge. We'll do our best to mirror actual circumstances on this flight, but of course your real experience will differ a bit. The first step in this flight is planning our route, and there are some strict ground rules we have to adhere to. What's usually called the long IFR cross-country refers to the requirements laid out in 6165D. Part of the required training for the IFR rating includes a cross-country flight that involves 250 nautical miles along airways or by directed routing from ATC. This criterion can be covered by filing and flying an IFR route. It needs to have an instrument approach at each airport, so the airports we choose will need to have those available. And there needs to be 3 different kinds of approaches on this flight. This requirement has been interpreted different ways over the years, but the FAA has recently loosened its interpretation of what a kind of approach is in this reg to allow any different type to qualify. So for example, a VOR approach, an RNAV with LPV mins, and an RNAV with LNAV mins would qualify, and there's no distinction that needs to be made between precision and non-precision approaches, unlike on the IFR check ride. If you're unsure at all, I would suggest clearing your route with whomever your likely DPE is going to be in advance if possible. So with these as the ground rules, we'll have a look at some airports. Our flight needs to be a total of at least 250 miles, so we'll need to choose a destination pretty far away. Flying west puts us over the ocean, and east of us are the Cascades, which will make for rough flying in the 172. Canada is to our north, which is doable if we don't mind dealing with customs, but let's plan to go down to Oregon. We've always wanted to see the Spruce Goose at the museum in McMinnville, so we'll plan that as a destination. On SkyVector, we're going to plot this out as a round trip, so our departure and destination will be Renton, KRNT. In the route, we'll put McMinnville, KMMV as a stop. The total round trip distance on this one is 286 miles. Let's add a third airport though to give us some variety, something not too far off the route we've drawn. We'll use Olympia Regional, a Delta airport on the other side of Seattle's airspace that we're probably pretty used to doing instrument training out of, flying out of Renton here. So that's our route. Let's see if it gels with all our requirements. First, it's 292 miles total, so it checks the first box of distance. Next, it needs to have an instrument approach at each airport and have a total of 3 different kinds of approaches. Now, the approach we plan to use will depend on the wind, so let's check METARs and TAFs for our route. We've pulled up Seattle, Renton, Olympia, McMinnville, and Portland for weather. First of all, the weather looks beautiful, no clouds at our altitudes with clear visibility. The winds at Renton and McMinnville are out of the north and northwest with variable winds at the other terminals, so we'll plan to land north. We want to do one ILS approach. There's one at Olympia, but it's to runway 17. We will need to circle to land at runway 35. This being a towered airport, we'll need to coordinate that with ATC, and they may not let us shoot the approach into opposite traffic. If that's the case, we could do the RNAV to runway 35, which has LNAV minimums. McMinnville has a VOR approach with circling only minimums. We can land into the wind on runway 35 here. This is a non-towered airport, so it should be easier to coordinate. So regardless of what we do at Olympia, we have 2 different kinds of approaches right there. Back at Renton, we'll plan the RNAV to 34. Now, this approach is to LNAV minimums, just like the RNAV 35 at Olympia. So if we do that, which we may have to if we don't get our ILS, we won't have our 3 different kinds of approaches. Here's a pro tip I've learned the hard way as a CFII. Always plan out another approach at another airport if necessary, so that you don't end up short on this little scavenger hunt. Close to McMinnville is Aurora, which has an RNAV that goes down to LPV minimums. If we have to, we'll shoot that approach and round out our 3rd kind of approach. The key to being a good double I is the ability to be flexible. Now let's plan our route. For this we'll use ForeFlight. We're starting at Renton and going to Olympia first. This route crosses from east to west almost right over SeaTac, so there'll likely be some very specific procedures ATC has for us to follow to traverse this route. A bit of local knowledge helps plan this out, but if you're unsure, a shorter flight like this, you're probably okay filing direct and having ATC tell you what to do. HOOME is the initial approach fix for the ILS we plan to fly, so let's at least put that into our route though. We could probably expect radar vectors either around or right over the top of SeaTac to get there. Next, we're going to plan our route to McMinnville. The Olympia VOR is co-located on the field and is the start of a Victor airway to take us there. So we put that in and follow it with Victor 165, terminating at the Newburgh VOR. From Newburgh, we'll go direct McMinnville. For the return route from McMinnville to Renton, let's first look at the departure procedure. For runway 35, the departure procedure involves climbing runway heading in order to intercept the 221 radial into Newburgh. We'll need to hold at Newburgh until we make the MEA for our route of flight. So one way or the other, our first fix out of McMinnville will be this VOR, so we'll add that once again to our route. We'll be continuing to the Battleground VOR along Victor 287, which has an MEA of 4,000. So if we reach 4,000 prior to the Newburgh VOR, which is likely, we won't have to hold. From Battleground, we have two choices of airway. Stay on 287 to the west or take 495 to the east. The MEA is lower on 287 because Victor 495 crosses close to some mountains, so we'll plan that, taking it back to the Olympia VOR. From there, we'll go direct Renton. Again, I'd expect heavy ATC vectoring to get us south and east of SeaTac. We want to pack for the flight so all our charts and NOTAMs etc. are downloaded. Now, we can file this as a so-called round-robin IFR flight, using Renton as both the departure and destination, but I like to file each flight individually and plan a full stop and taxi back for departure. This allows us to get more practice with actually landing from the approach and getting a clearance at each airport, but it will add Hobbs time to the flight, so if you're okay with the extra expense, go for it. With our flights on file, it's time to get into the aircraft and get ready for our clearance and set up for departure. We'll pick that up in the next video, which you can head over to the website now and see. Click the link here or in the description to go see the full flight series. See you there!